Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the Hackin Cast. We have been doing these on Wednesdays. We're going to keep doing these on Wednesdays. So thanks for always showing up. I am Deb, or Deb the Deb on Discord. We have Amanda Berlin here. We have Jeremy here. Rick and Velda are joining us today. So thanks for showing up, guys. And this is pre-show banter. We're just feel free to go fill up your coffee. You don't need to be here until 1 o'clock.
Well, I don't have anything else to do, so yeah. That's fine.
Oh, you don't have to be here. You can, but
no, I can't work right now. I closed all my Slacks. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll get distracted.
Yeah. So, Amanda, where are you in the world?
Right now we are in kind of a suburb of Cleveland.
Okay.
Yep. Next to each other.
Whoa. That's a UDP handshake. Does that exist? What?
We have really, really advanced technology that allows.
I'm in South Dakota, and there's bikers running everywhere right now. So.
Oh yes, talk to us about Sturgis.
I'm hiding up at the cabin because I don't want to go to all the crowds. But yeah, it's been pretty crazy. We actually have a rental on Main Street, and I think my neighbor slashed our renter's tires because they came with their bike. Yeah, so we're hoping the neighbor next to us had cameras so we could see if it was our other neighbor, but we don't know. She's kind of psycho. So
I'm having a neighbor problem too.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
That's my rental neighbor, so it's not a big deal. It's just all my rental. It's not good for my renters when they come in.
Right.
Yeah. Is that like the locals turning on the tourists? Is that why they slashed their tires?
Yeah, there's a lot of locals that do not like the biker crowd, so they
move somewhere else.
Exactly.
I know. Everybody always complains. I say the same thing. Hey, if you don't want to live in town, just move outside of town. That's what I did. So
they're like, well, we were here first. I'm like, well, it was going to be an adult. Yeah. I have a friend who lives in Outer Banks, and when lockdown happened, she said it was like that. Like the locals just turned on the tourists and were not kind. I'm like, well, that's like your livelihood. So I'm like,
yeah, we have a lot. It's big tourists here because I'm like in Deadwood. I'm like just right outside of Deadwood, South Dakota. So yeah, it's touristy, and we love the tourists. Pretty meet interesting folks from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And the bikers, I don't mind the bikers at all. I had a bike a while ago before I had kids. When I was, when I had fun. And then I had kids. That didn't happen anymore. So. So the stuff you give up, that kind of went out the window with golf. Golf went out the window when you have kids. You can't afford that stuff anymore because but they're getting ready to get out of the house. So I'm looking forward to get back into golfing.
Nice. How many do you have, Rick?
I have 3.
Okay.
Three teenagers, and I'll tell you what, they're cute when they're a baby. Just hope they're a baby all the time, or when they're elementary school, because when they become teenagers, they're a totally different beast.
It's way different.
It's crazy.
I have the whole range. My 18-year-old's in Marine boot camp right now, and then I have a 12 and a 9-year-old.
I have a 12 and 9. We're about to have 3 teenagers as well. My 12-year-old's about to turn 13, and then I have 16, 17, and then a 9-year-old. The 9-year-old is lovely, being 9.
34, 29.
Yeah.
Married, out of the house.
I was all like, I'm glad I'm out of that phase.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Hackin Cast with Amanda and Jeremy. We're going to be doing an intro to tabletop exercises, and we'll be in the Discord on the back end to answer any questions that you have. And with that, take it away.
Yay! All right, you're up, man.
All right. So we're here today to go over security D&D tabletop exercises. Again, D&D is defense and detection. I can't even start this presentation without saying the inspiration that we got through backdoors and breaches, and how we went to, kind of going in and getting more specific into industry sectors and going a whole nother step further. So if you don't know what backdoors and breaches is, please, I'm sure in the Discord, they can go through and expand upon that. This entire webcast is gone from a B-sides training, really small B-sides training, to now the 2 to 4 day exercises. So we're really excited to go further with this. So our first section here is an intro to tabletops, and we'll go through some things here. Go to the agenda. So again, we're going to go to the intro into what a tabletop exercise is very quickly. We're going to overview playbooks, why they're important in the combining into your tabletop exercises, an overview of our defense and detection tabletop exercise class, which will be at Wild West Hackin Fest, and some webcast loot. Again, if you haven't done a tabletop exercise, they can range from a couple hours to days. I have had inspired through some of the ISACs 15-minute tabletop exercises that are really structured towards getting 1 hour, everyone in a room for 1 hour, going through a 15-minute tabletop exercise, going through goals and objectives, and having an after-action report that you can use for a more tactical approach for tabletops, and do them more often. I know some organizations might do these monthly, getting the IT and other business units in the room monthly to go over a 1 hour meeting, go over a 15-minute tabletop. And we have an example here that we'll kind of discuss and go back and forth between me and Amanda. Obviously, in a tabletop, you want to be very interactive. We wish we could be more interactive. But if you want to, go to another level, you can always sign up for our class.
Yeah, and along with the tabletop exercises, a lot of times companies will add specific drills, failing over a firewall or trying to restore a backup as just part of the whole tabletop procedure, just to kind of test out that the things that are in the playbooks are actually working. And we cover a lot of that in the class too.
Yep, that's an important point to mention, is for something like a disaster recovery business continuity test, there's a lot of moving parts. Those are really hard at scale to plan and to complete. But if you want to take just one section of that and test, maybe in your tabletop exercise, you'll focus in restoring from backup, just that, and very focused, so that works. And a lot of organizations, when they try to do DR testing or validation, they try to chew off too much, and they can really get a lot further by focusing and splitting everything up into small parts. So that kind of will go into our first scenario here that we have as an example. Or, sorry, I thought I had these memorized.
Getting ahead of yourself.
A little. So in a 15-minute tabletop exercise, you want to, again, like I stated previously, break these scenarios into meaningful learning points. And also, just like, your Christmas cheer, read it loud and clear for all to hear. You need to read out and make sure everyone is very clear on the entire scenario.
A lot of times, I've been in tabletops where they have their, they have their playbooks, they have all of the technical stuff set, but they have terrible communication. So a lot of times tabletops are just an exercise in communication skills. And yeah, that's something that you have to kind of keep front and center, letting everybody know what's going on, and what procedures, processes you have in place. And yeah.
Yes, and having a discussion page to facilitate, to go through how your tabletop will align to your incident response process. Obviously there's different types of frameworks out there. There's obviously one large main one, but even if you have a custom one, you want to tailor all of that. So when you're going through your tabletop exercise, you're aligning that to your incident response processes as well as your policies. And that might also be more so for awareness of the other teams that might not be directly included in an IR, even if you are a small company. again, so some of the objectives is to have a very engaging discussion and identify gaps. So while you're going through it, also having someone dedicated to be scribing, that's not included in the back and forth, even if, whoever that person is, just so they can go through and kind of take notes on that. Again, there's some do's and don'ts. Go over the don'ts. You can have scope creep, but you can want to do a lot of things. And you just have to really want to focus on specific parts. There's a lot of scenarios that might have 6 different, rabbit holes that a scenario could go down. You want to get away from a lot of the what ifs and focus on, a specific target to do a test of a specific control or procedure. And also, don't be that person. So just don't be that person.
So I have one question from Discord. How do we identify target audiences for tabletop exercises, and who all do you include during these exercises? So for the training stuff that we do is different than you would do, I think, at a place of employment, don't you think?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can do that depending on your organization. I highly recommend just focusing on your staff. If you're a one-man security shop or a woman security shop, just focus on the IT aspect first. You want to include all the business units. I mean, that's the end goal. You want to, but when you do that, I have experienced a few tabletops that have done that too quickly. They haven't been structured enough. As much as you might want to just go and do a tabletop or go play backdoors and breaches with your CEO and HR and legal, you really have to tailor it so they get the best out of it. Because
they need to see the impact from their perspective. That's the whole idea of bringing in all of the different business units, is it's not just all about tech.
Right. So it will, again, it depends answer, but start small, have it organized and structured, have it quick, especially when you start reaching out to legal, HR, your maybe CFO, things like that. You definitely want to make it as digestible as possible. So I highly recommend 15-minute tabletops first, having them in a room for 4 hours, which you might get to that maturity level at some point, depending on your organization, but starting real small. And we'll go right into the scenario now.
You sure?
I'm sure. I'm pretty sure it's a slide.
Good job. Are we going to read the slide?
I'm going to read, yeah. You go for it.
I just hate reading slides because they can read them, but I'm still going to do it anyways. So this is our first tabletop scenario. We have 60 to
about 60 plus
60 that we give out. So we just pick a random malware one. So malware containing a backdoor is discovered on the surveillance cameras used in sensitive locations, including the conference room used by senior executives. It was determined that the cameras were active during several meetings, including one with team managers during contract negotiations. How do you respond?
So these can get as specific, they can get tailored. We have some templates. We've taken them from, everything from ISAC meetings to other resources. We've tailored and taken all there is. So again, there's no reason you can't just take something else. You don't have to recreate the wheel. There's a lot of scenarios that you can start with, and then you can get more specific. So some scenarios might have a lot of follow-up questions. So we'll go through that as well. So you can kind of think about, what do you want to do with this? What do you want to focus on? You can go a lot of routes with scenarios, but you want to have a follow-up focus and really go through, to test some of your procedures, or what would you do? Would you do anything? Depending on the organization, there could be, if it was a public contract or a public negotiation or it wasn't important, maybe that's, not important, but most likely, hopefully these things would set off some red flags. So going through the next slide here, you can kind of go each one of these scenarios that we have, go into a discussion focus. Again, how do you find the capabilities of the malware? Do you have, and I'm going to throw some things out there, inventory of assets? Do you know what those cameras should be communicating? How are they, communicating? Does a contractor support these cameras? So you can kind of go into all these, items here. How would you fix it? Can you patch them? Are there other mitigating controls?
Yeah, are they all on the same firmware levels? Are they, I think you already said, are they supported? Do you even know them are at? Are they accessible from the internet?
Right. So, and then all of the tabletops that we have, and I recommend that everyone does this as well, is aligned to, some type of framework. So in the corner there, you can see the NIST functions. There's, everything can probably be tied to some function within a framework, but you want to have some focused ones. So one of the benefits in tying into the NIST functions is kind of a more of an audit, as well as showing management when you go through a framework review, or how you're aligning your program or your gaps. You can go back and say, we did these 10 tabletops last year, or we did these 12 once a month, and we focus on all these NIST functions. Then you can kind of work backwards. And if you know you have gaps in certain areas or framework areas, you can then, focus and do more tabletops specific to those gaps that you might, have. And you might start maybe not with NIST, but you might even start at a higher level with like the CIS controls and other types of control frameworks, or maybe just an audit or a pen test that you know that you have gaps on as well. And you can, maybe there's some type of findings that you can kind of tie that to. So however you do that, highly recommended that once you do these, they don't just, get recorded and go into a box somewhere, and that they're actually aligning. And then once you have any of the findings after this, you can have action items. So the big important part of any tabletop, even a 15-minute one, is to have an after action report at the very, very high level. And I believe we go into that next.
Well, so there's a question. Do you use MITRE ATT&CK framework to build scenarios? And I mean, we don't have it any specifically tied to MITRE. We've just tied them all to NIST because it's super in depth. And MITRE is too. That's a lot of the injects that we've built for training. We've used MITRE for. Like, we have one that's exec bypass for PowerShell. What are some of the other ones? Like password spraying. And those are all, specified in MITRE. But yeah, we haven't tied it actually specifically back to it.
Yeah, so we definitely, once you start, and again, this is kind of like a slow, crawl, kind of walk thing that we're going through here, just a very high level. But then once we get into the other slides and in our training, we go from having a 15-minute tabletop that's discussionary and more just recorded and has some action items. Then we go into a technical, and where you have your playbooks, and then those playbooks will align to either a MITRE or other types of frameworks. And then from there, we go to another level and have an actual technical tabletops where you have to actually do and detect. And that's where MITRE ATT&CK would line up with that, especially in some of our labs. So our training goes more in depth and goes into specific technical labs. Even for somebody that isn't that technical, we'll walk through that so they can reinforce some of the tabletop scenarios with actual technical detection.
Just like doing response. A drill in your tabletop in the enterprise. Yeah, they just really complement each other well.
Yep. So going through the after action, this is an example of an after action report. This is a very, very basic one. There are probably a lot of other more specific templates out online in the interwebs, but this is an example. And really, whatever you choose or however you choose to record your tabletop for an after action report, you want to make sure you have everyone that's involved. Sometimes, again, you want at first, like we had the question earlier, when you start going to a maturity where you include other business units, you might want them just to come in as an observer, where they just observe you talking through some things with your IT department or maybe one other. You can slowly bring in people as just observers. And then as they get involved and aware, you can all of a sudden have maybe legal or your communications team there, so they can start to participate and know when to expect to be involved or when they know they should be involved. And you can have that discussion. And those discussions, I think, are the best, because there's a lot of things that are left out, because we're a lot of, we like our tooling, we like our scripts, we like all of our technical blinky lights, but we don't really, we know that, oh yeah, communications needs to be involved when, there's a compromise and things like that, but like when? Or maybe they should be involved when there's potential, or maybe they shouldn't be. When is that threshold? And that's where it gets into, maybe you should have a playbook on that, and maybe somewhat guidelines on when to get them involved or not to be involved. So they know that they might get a call to answer your phone on a Saturday at night, or they're probably not going to, depending on the organization.
And that's the point in time when they come in as observers that you can ask them pointed questions that kind of get them used to what the tabletop would be once they're a full participant. Things like, you could ask your HR, all right, well, how does it impact your day-to-day if this whole server goes down, or if, this shared folder with all the resumes gets deleted? It makes them think a little bit more about the security implications of things that you might be implementing. And I mean, I've had tabletops based off of real live events that have happened at that customer. So, they have an event, it's handled very poorly. They recognize that there wasn't really much documentation on it. They were all, running around freaking out at the time because stuff's really, really happening and there's a big business impact. And they're like, all right, well, let's do that again when we're not all running around like our heads are chopped off. You can sit there calmly and work your way and think through all of the different possible iterations of what could have happened if you had done X a different way. And that's probably, the communication in that part is one of the really good benefits of a tabletop, just the calmness that you're able to have for the documentation and everything.
And another thing that probably should be bolded in here is that these can get pretty depressing.
Which is why we add unicorns.
Yeah. And you always want to document your major strengths or any strengths. You want to make sure that when you go through these, even if, I guess there could be some potential scenarios where you might not have any full strengths, but really make sure that you have some strength.
The strength alone is there. You're there talking about having a tabletop, so something got you to that point.
Right. So the strengths are real important because it can quickly turn into a finger pointing. And well, if we had more budget or staff, this would be, we could respond to this. You want to make sure that type of
accusatory.
Yeah, you want to make sure it's a good environment, and you want to make sure up front that these are all here to get the organization better. Feel like an audit or again a finger pointing real fast, especially if you're a small organization. But it's very important to make sure that you have a good atmosphere and a good environment. And that's why you want to really start small and work your way up so you can have observers and it can be a really, really good engaging discussion. The other item to really highlight here is having sign off from upper management. So there are going to be gaps and those depressive things of, well, if we had this, we could do this. If we have more money here, we could do this. And there's going to be some type of accepted risk, unfortunately, that your business, has. And then however much that risk is, hopefully it lowers at some point when you do these. But you need to make sure that management knows that if we don't do these things that could fill these gaps, then this scenario is going to go just how it did in the tabletop. And that might be okay depending on the organization or the specific gaps that you found, or they might need to be researched. But someone has to be dedicated to go, or there has to be hours or staffing to go do that research or do that analysis. And having upper management sign off on that, whatever those actions are really important. And also to break those up, as an example here, just short-term and long-term. There might be, again, short-term mitigations, workarounds, or a long-term recommendation that, maybe we can't automate this onboarding procedure, but we know we might have a workflow or we might have this thing to be able to do this or time to do this in the future. Then, have that as a long-term recommendation, whatever that is. And so you can have sign off. So then 6 months from now, you can say, hey, we need to focus on this. You signed off on this. And that there's going to be a special way where you do that within your policy and procedures of your upper management. But that's, again, an example that can really make your tabletops go to a whole nother level of where you're at. You're getting and starting to remediate issues that you never were before because you're having that discussion.
Can you take a breath now?
Yeah, I can. I might have to take a drink from my Taco Kitty space Dorito coffee mug. The other thing, once you start to mature more and go through these tabletops and get really good engagement and processes down, a lot of those processes can kind of be split up or put into what are called playbooks. So it's kind of playbook runbook for incident response. It doesn't have to only be for incident response. It could be all kinds of procedures. Other standard operating procedures could be tied into playbooks. Really, depending on your organization, you could get really, really granular with these playbooks, or you could get very broad with them. But as long as you have some type of threshold or review of how you engage with certain things or incidences, you can take your tabletops to a whole nother level. So in a lot of larger tabletops that you have a few hours or days, you bring your policies and procedures and you go through and you say, you have a scenario and you say, okay, how do you respond to this? And you go through and you flip through your policy procedures or look at them on your tablet or whatever it is. And you say, yeah, we have something for that. How good is it?
Is it up to date?
Is it up to date? Right. So those are a lot of the concepts of just having documentation in general, let alone a playbook. Playbooks are a little more of an example of, just like you would in, any type of sporting events, all those sports ball out there. You can have different plays for different, things and reactionary events or preventive things. So we're going to go through just a concept of playbooks. This isn't a playbook class or webinar, but we go through just an example and the uses of them.
So we have 2 more questions.
2 more questions. All right.
So while I like to sign off on risk, action / acceptance, what of 10 years worth of work, one can't do it all in a week, how might one guide the discussion towards prioritization of largest risk and then get sign off? So when you can tie it to something that is compliance related, that they have to comply with. If you don't have anything compliance related, it can be a little bit hard depending on what environment you're in, how much backing you have from upper level management. But smaller, just like present, if you get 5 minutes with an exec, right, and they're listening to you, you have to make that 5 minutes count. So money talks always, right? So if there's something that is going to impact the bottom line, so say you're at a manufacturing plant that has, any rules on the firewall, but you're not allowed to take it down or make any changes. You're like, all right, well, just so you know, there's a very high risk of that router being compromised and it taking down the entire plant, which would be longer time that it would be down, and this is the amount of money that it could possibly take, versus if we did it in little increments, you can plan for that and plan around it. So I've had a lot of success doing it that way. I worked at the hospital for a long time and just tied everything to HIPAA and PCI because if they aren't compliant, it's costing them money. Yeah.
So yeah, I've had a little different experience also working in unregulated environments, let's just say. And it's hard sometimes to tie it to something. You might have to start getting very creative. I'll plug another kind of Wild West Hacking Fest and Black Hills is Chris has a I think a 1-hour webinar on security leadership and talking to the executives. I'm sure somebody can probably link it in the Discord. I also took his 3-hour or 3-day, I believe it was 3 days class on security leadership management. He really focuses a lot on that. And it really aligned with a lot of the things that I've had to do and get creative. So when you don't have regulation or they don't care about regulation, which I hope they do, but there are environments that don't have direct compliance ties very, very easily. So you have to tie it to whatever's important to them. Some of the suggestions that I know Chris made and I've worked with as well is tying them to ROI, tying to the sales team, tie into if we can do this faster, the sales team can get, information or sales quicker. They can close business deals quicker. If you don't have sales, you have to tie it to something else. And it's going to be dependent on your organization, wherever you have to tie that risk to. So that's why I really, the tabletops, if you start to mature and get observers in the room, especially high-level board members or executives, or have the conversation about the tabletops, you can start to learn and get to know them. So, having coffee and getting to know these people are really important, so you can understand how to tie risk to your industry sector. So it's going to be very, very specific to you, but there are a lot of creative ways. So hit me up in Discord. I'll be happy to talk about more ways to try to tie risk to the things that you want to get done, which is, again, be creative, use your social engineering in a very ethical way, and get through it. We're going to go through some more. Was there a second one?
There's a bunch of questions.
Okay, well, we'll go through those.
One is actually, a couple of them will wait until the end. This one actually is about the slide, so that's good.
Okay.
When you're discussing playbooks, are you talking about procedural or technical ones? As I find that procedurally, they work really well. People know their responsibilities and then lines of communication. But when applied to technical responses, they tend to be more blinkering and things.
I agree. It's really hard. It's a really hard thing to do. There are a lot of good books on it and a lot of good things that I've done. The playbooks will be more procedural. What I found is if they tie to your technical, so I'll give you an example of if you have a lot of threat hunting queries or you have detection queries, tying them, if you either source control those in a Git or like Bugzilla or something, tying those into your playbooks and tying the playbooks to all those technical controls as more like an index is pretty helpful, especially when you start to expand into the MITRE ATT&CK framework and things like that. You can start to align your rule sets, all those technical things down. And that's why once you mature to a point where you get down the procedural aspect, you start going down the technical aspect. If I'm in a tabletop and I say I focus that into a technical tabletop, and my SOC or hunt team has their playbooks in their hand, if I say, okay, we have this surveillance camera somewhere, it's in the boardroom B, where do you find that? I'm going to have them find that right in front of me. Where is it in the asset inventory? Is it in some type of other item? How do you know what that is? How do you know the protocols running on it? And then you can get really into those technical weeds. And I recommend those being separate tabletops of your management tabletops, as you will. And then at some point you might be able to combine those depending on your organization. So you do have to split those out. It's pretty hard. Some people try to put it all into one playbook. Some people split it out into different playbooks. I recommend splitting them out from a procedural playbook, and then those procedural playbooks to have technical references. So again, it's going to be dependent on your organization. There's a lot of good materials out there. But we'll go on to the next slide here.
Trying to slack and.
So we kind of beat this up a little, but why playbooks? Again, we are all in an ever-changing environment in the cybers, and
I mean, who probably didn't have a pandemic playbook before this year?
Right.
Most people.
Right.
Or a work from home play, or anything remote related.
But we did have an infectious disease playbook, and we also had a dirty bomb kind of playbook, and we just try to combine those on, and we were at least crawling around more than we were completely dead in how we had to function. But again, playbooks are more flexible, they're supposed to be more flexible than procedures. They're not supposed to be very, very strict. There's going to be interpretation. That's why humans still have a play in the game here before Skynet takes over. We have to make educated guesses, and the playbook needs to have enough information where that analyst or person can make enough education or enough analysis to make a decision, an actionable decision very quickly without having to escalate. If you have good playbooks, there would be specific escalation measures in there so they can function autonomously, as much trust as you might have depending on your organization. in these. And that's where the playbooks really start to create efficiencies. So again, there's probably 100 different ways you can start recording your playbooks. There's a lot of technical tool sets that cost a lot of money. There's a lot of SOAR applications that will automate a lot of this, and they'll have kind of like a technical playbook and what they want you to do from a response level. But the start and ground level is documentation. So again, having your
something is better than nothing.
Correct. And this is something you can do now, and then look to see how extensive your playbook needs are. But always recommend, again, having titles so you can insert your logos and unicorns. Categories, however you want to break out your categories, they might change over time, but have some general categories. And some people recommend crazy amount of ID, structures, so you can start to record your tens of thousands of playbooks. But one of the specific things in here I'll just highlight on is that the INV is investigative. There's also high fidelity ones. So the difference between those is high fidelity means that whatever triggered this playbook and these actions, whenever you're told to go to this playbook or something, that means that whatever that is and those procedures should be followed very closely. That means that you have a very high level, high fidelity of a item that you need to respond immediately to using this playbook. So there's kind of try to split those out. However you do that, if you number them or label them or however, then everything else kind of lumps into an investigative. So again, it's very flexible. It takes some interpretation, but those interpretations have to have a structured scope and applicability. So that's where it kind of goes into the next section here. Again, having an objective statement. We all don't like objective statements. We just want to do things, but it is very important. And where this gets more important
is when other people are reading it.
Exactly. So if you have a new team, so I've kind of luckily expanded my team since COVID, and I have fresh people, again, experienced people, but in a new environment. And as much as I would love to have a full training program for all my staff, especially in this current events, I don't have that much time. I need experienced people to look through the playbook structures. I need them to respond and be able to get a general gist of how the whole thing's structured, especially when you start getting contractors and all kinds of stuff. As you grow and scale, these get more and more important, even something like an objective statement. Other things is scope and applicability. This might be dependent on how your organization is structured. If you have a bunch of sister companies, if you have different agencies you work with, there are different playbooks for different scopes of, some people might combine or have more in the procedures of what to do if it's an executive or VIP, but you might be a large enough company where you have an entire different playbook for a whole set of people or business units. Again, it might just be all employees, all systems. But when you start getting into it, especially when you get into ransomware ones, you might want to have more scope and applicability for some of the playbooks. But the meat and potatoes is the methodology and procedures. Those are where it's going to get into more of the processes and procedures, and potentially the indexing to the technical, documentation or controls or threat hunting queries,
which could vary greatly depending on what that scope and applicability is, because you're not going to handle, an endpoint that nobody ever uses that gets ransomware. You're not going to handle that the same as a database server.
Yep. And then also you're another thing that I see a lot in the scope is internal only, right? So you might have a separate playbook for external. So if you have a phishing attack and you got compromised through phishing, or there's a phishing campaign or something's going, but it hasn't gone external, you might go into another playbook. Or again, depending on how these are structured, there's no right or wrong way to do a playbook. There's no catch-all way to do a playbook. And any place that you read about playbooks and stuff, they'll give you all the tools for the toolbox, but you have to make your own toolbox. And then reporting. You might have a need to report afterwards. You might want to report. Again, I'll plug another Wild West Hacking Fest, the Applied Purple Team training. They do a good entire life cycle of testing this stuff, and then reporting how important those reports are. As much as we love report writing, to have those executive overviews and things like that as well. So again, the meat and potato of the procedures. This is just an example of handling employee phishing reports. Again, how do you obtain a search for IOCs? That might relate to a technical, whole thing. Again, it doesn't have to be in it. You don't want these playbooks to be, 60,000 pages. You want them to be quick things to look, and they might reference other standard operating procedures. They might reference other things. They might reference org charts. They might reference all kinds of stuff. So you're really kind of making this as kind of like an organic structure of processes that you want to put in to be pretty flexible. So you have all the skeleton of what you need to do here. Is it a campaign? Do you care if it's a campaign? Do you track campaigns? Maybe it's not about a campaign, but if it's 5 people that reported it versus 100 people versus 1,000 people that report, depending on your organization size, you will react differently. There might be different escalation procedures. It's very important to have that generally defined, and there will always be exceptions. And that's just how the world works. There will always be those 10% or 5% exceptions, but you'll just have to deal and know that you make that decision to, okay, this is where a playbook says, but here's some notes that there could be exceptions. And that will probably be littered throughout your playbooks, but again, you have to get as much flexibility as you can where you know what to do in certain scenarios and it's documented. Everyone's doing the same thing.
Yeah, because an exception for this one, so this is handling employee phishing reports. What if it's coming from the inside?
Right.
You might not have anything in the playbook or procedures or anything taking that into account.
And you might have 27 different ways to search for IOCs. So again, could you go into your Office 365 and start going through that? Yeah, but you might have another spam reporting. You might have, centralized logging. It might correlate all the way up to your SIM. You might have additional, APIs or systems connected in to be able to do analysis or do some, analyzing of the phishing emails, things like that. And once you start to scale your security operations, you'll start to have these overlapping tool sets. And how to use them, when to use them, what's better to use. And again, these are things that the playbooks can, if not contain, link to. Again, response procedures. This is an example of, alerting employees. Do you alert employees company-wide for, 5 phishing emails that you got and that you blocked? Probably not. Maybe. Again, do you flag emails? How do you do that? Do you remove? When do you actually remove from user inboxes? Okay, you blocked it on the egress, and now in the new world, how do you do that? You have host-based blocking or other types of protections. When do you have to actually run some scripts to remove it from user inboxes? Do you do it every single time? Do you do it for 10? Do you do it for 50? Do you do it only for 1,000? Again, when do you sinkhole DNS? When do you need to do these specific things? And these might relate to different procedures. So, we're getting closer to unicorns. Combining
I see a part about rolling dice finally.
Yeah.
So.
Combining the tabletop with the playbooks. Again, once you get a little more mature with it, or can do it right away, and you have playbooks, you can only use those tools and processes that are within playbooks during the tabletop. Then you can only do and conduct procedures that are documented or linked to in each playbook. And then you record all major procedures not documented. You can then go a step further. This gets into like the backdoor breaches kind of flavor of, again, then roll a dice for successful procedure or process. You might have different modifiers for that. Those are when things get fun. And then
if you were bored up until this point,
yes,
now you should not be, hopefully.
Right. So we still got 20 minutes. It's going to be a fun 20 minutes, and we're going to go through leveling up. All right. So next level, technical tabletops and playbooks. All right. This is where the magic happens. So we're going to go through a specific scenario that we have built into our class that you actually get to do, and then also have connected into your playbook.
Well, this is that malware one that we just talked. I had to read the slide for.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just like,
Go right into it.
Sweet. So this is a PowerShell malware dropper attack that Scott Sutherland has a great blog on, 15 ways to bypass PowerShell execution policy, and also something that is in MITRE ATT&CK framework. So it kind of covers a whole bunch of the bases. There's a bunch of really easy ways that you can test your defenses and detection, and this is one of them. Execution policy isn't a security feature by nature. It's kind of a safety feature, but a lot of malware droppers bypass it. So it's great to kind of detect on that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things that we'll do in the labs as well. This is just an example of finding it. Like you said, we cover the defense and the detection part. We'll go over some group policy stuff on how to log all PowerShell modules. You can set different module settings in group policy. And this is just what it looks like in the event viewer, and then an event that we had at work that was an actual client. That's why they blocked out stuff there, because we found on one of their web servers a PowerShell dropper attack on that. So that works in well, because you can pretend that you had a super advanced security system with all these cameras, and whatever server that they talk back to is the one that ended up getting malware.
Right. So
I'm just going to talk about.
So that just quick, it was a quick magic, so there's more to come. But in the defense and detection tabletop, we hook in labs throughout the scenarios where you have to go in and out of the lab, and you will have a company, you will have roles, and we go into an entire role-playing aspect of scenarios.
I mean, somebody did post a GIF of Putin, so we actually have 5 different companies that will break people out into. And I mean, you could do this in your organization as well, as a group, right? It's always nice to have the viewpoint of somebody else, making decisions, like you were the CISO, or if you had to do a press release, right? You never know what those kind of people might have to go through unless you kind of walk through and think about it. So that can be helpful as well.
Yeah, so this whole, with the backdoor, just to talk about the inspiration for this type of class, at least from my perspective, is from the backdoors and breachers. Another thing that I've been involved in is a white team judge for CCDC. If anyone's familiar with the collegiate cyber defense competition. With that, you have a bunch of college kids that get prepared and go into this 1 to 2 day competition that they have to secure their systems. They get some simulated systems. They have to secure the systems. They have a red team that's usually a professional or volunteer red team that comes and is attacking their network. They have points for uptime for their various system, if that's FTP to HTTPS to email, all those things. And then they also have there's a white team of judges that are injecting things like the board. The CEO of the board wants this crazy cat chat software to talk with his son or daughter, and he wants to install in the company network, and he's the CEO, and it has to happen, and you have to secure it. So they have to go and install this stuff, secure it, and then obviously it's opening up risks and vulnerabilities purposely for the red team, things like that. And they have to not only do the technical safeguards, but also respond and do some memos and policies. They'll all of a sudden have to do a specific policy. They'll have to do this, and it kind of gets that full on kind of scenario training. And my being involved for so long with that, I was thinking, I wish I could get my team to go through. Do we have adult CCDC? And again, we have capture flags. We have DEF CON has their OpenSOC and their Blue Team Village, which is probably the closer of it. But and there's net wars and things like that. But there's not that full kind of scenario-based training. So this is kind of like an inspiration from that, just to share a little. So
that malware tabletop, that the short one that we walked through, right? We take a bunch of those that are normally, just small 15-minute tabletops and expand them into several hours over several days. Like I said, we choose your industry sector and company roles. We have healthcare, manufacturing, a startup, and a couple other ones I can't remember. And you not only end up in the group, but you end up as a specific role. So, like we were talking before, you don't always just have your team. Once you have more complex, tabletop meetings, you bring in other people. So we have media and lawyers and a bunch of C-levels that can come in. And so if you ever want to just play along, but you can only stay for a little bit, you get the CEO role because you can come in, make some decisions, and then peace out. And then you build your playbooks around that. You can't rely, you might be relying on one specific person for this run book or this procedure, and then you realize, well, we can't do that because what if that person leaves? You need to have some kind of backup plan built in. We build out those playbooks in the class as well, so you get like the templates of what they are, and each, depending on what sector you're in, you're budget restricted. You have to pick if you have a firewall or not based on your budget. You might not have any endpoint software. You might just have to roll with, Windows Defender. So that just depends also on what sector you're in.
Windows Defender blocks all the things.
It does block a lot of things.
So you have built out a whole technical lab as well. So you have your company that you have, which has a character sheet. So this gets into the little defense and detection role-playing game, where you have a character sheet, you have hit points, you have certain damage that you might take depending on how you react to a scenario or fail at a scenario, and then you have a domain controller, an Active Directory, and you have those things where you will go and dive into technical labs here and there. Again, it's not, I would say, for a very, very technical person, but this is also for non-technical people, and we have all the procedures to go through. So you could be a generally non-technical person and do a password spray. So we want to teach that so we can teach people that are non-technical and also people that are technical on the processes and procedures and kind of marry those together. And
so you'll start with the password spray, work through the playbook, depending on what tooling your company has. You'll not only do the password spray, but you'll be able to see the results of it, as well as what it looks like in the sim, and then continue on through the playbook and sometimes roll dice so we can see what your fate is on whether, your firewall stopped it or not. And then after you've made it through that tabletop, we build that after action report and fill it all out.
If you survive.
If you survive.
We've had one company ever survive.
I think
we've had one or two companies survive. We've done it just a few
There
times.
Was a lot of critical failures.
But you still have to give an after action report regardless of what you do. So that gives you the percent. You have to present to the rest of the team, including. So normally how we break out, we say we have 40 people or 50 people in a class. We'll split out to between 5 to 10 people per team through the roles, and then they'll have all their own companies, and they'll kind of react in their own ways. And at the end, each person will learn from the other companies, since all the companies are focused in specific industry sectors. And depending on the class, we might expand that out more. So we have more teams, more people, and then you can kind of present as a team. So we try to make it as collaborative and engaging. So you do get a lot of good things just even listening to the other team and how they're reacting. So you even get more than just participating yourself. So that's kind of where we'll go into. Which,
if you've not done tabletops or anything like this where you're currently at, really give you a good eye-opening view of what it could potentially look like and work. And also like you said, you get to listen to what all of the other companies have done as well, and maybe craft your defenses based on something that they said.
Yep. And so we have some of the teams here to kind of go through, or the companies. So this is an example of some of the companies that are there.
Oh, St. Coon's Glory. I knew the hospital wasn't in the name.
So we have the characters that are able to be rolled for and picked for each of the teams that are there. So you'll see that we have everything from a startup company to manufacturing, to hospital, to banking and energy. And each one of them have their size, their budget, which does go to a number. We're trying to, not give you all the secret magic and sauce here. You do get some have strengths, some have weaknesses. So you can see that, like for instance, the AI chain blockchain startup has to roll twice to pass actions. And they get a negative certain amount on each roll because they have too many buzzwords. But they have a high budget, right? So things like that, they're more flexible, they're smaller. There are other things that on the other side, St. Putin's Glory, the hospital there, one of the weaknesses is that you get a minus X on some rolls, and you have 30 seconds for an action because you're a hospital, you have to respond quicker. And we have been transitioning as a virtual. Usually this is in person, so some of these specific rules might change, but this is an example of where, there's a little of an exaggerated point on these weaknesses, but it makes the game fun, it makes it engaging. And you can't have defense and protection role-playing games without feats and special skills.
Yep.
So you do get certain skills and other things, which makes you have a kind of like a decision analysis portion of this, of where you want your company to focus on depending on your strengths or weaknesses. So it's pretty interesting to see what people pick or what they don't pick. So you can have unicorn cloud magic where you have 100% uptime, or you can get the one-time use orb of awesome from knowing Dave Kennedy. Will make all your things.
Everything just gets fixed.
Yeah, everything gets fixed. Or you could have some legal team ninjas. So things like that, you can pick and see how you want to kind of define your company, or and based on your weaknesses and strengths. So with this, we're you got 8 minutes here. You all get some webcast loop. I believe we're going to be pushing it through Discord in some fashion, but we'll. Yep. It probably won't be immediately after the webcast, but it will probably be before the end of the day, depending on your time zone. But we will be giving you 2 15-minute tabletops that are aligned to NIST, and then a few other frameworks that we have. The after action report template, and we'll give you a few playbook templates and some of the examples. They'll be filled out. It's, again, an example. It might work for you, it might not work for you, but it's a starting point. You can find a lot of good stuff online. Again, we're not the, going to tell, how to do a playbook, but, it's very important for the overall use of a tabletop exercise and understanding your gaps and risks.
And you'll get all these slides.
And you'll get all the slides with all, maybe some extra memes.
And then this is us. What was it, like 3 weeks ago? We started what sounds like a shell corporation, Cybersecurity Conference Training LLC. That's me, Amanda, at InfoSister on Twitter, and I work for Blue Mira. And then you?
Yep, you can reach me again on Twitter at Cyborg00101. It's my AIM username I made when I was 12 years old. I actually was. Anyway. Or you can contact me at jmeo.personal@gmail.com. And you can contact either of us at the Proton Mail account, which is our preferred method. For, again, additional wisdom or offers of gold.
We get the gold?
We get the gold. Goes to charity. Goes to mental health.
Who's charity?
Goes to mental health.
All right. I think that's
all we have. We can sit around and answer for questions. We tried to finish up here a little early.
Yeah, I tried to answer questions while we were going, but I'm pretty sure I probably missed some.
Yeah, you guys did wonderful.
Anybody have any pointed questions that we missed?
And you are muted still.
Oh, I'm muted?
No.
Oh. Oh, Deb's muted. Oh, wait, no. I had my sound off. There we go.
How about now?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Technical difficulties.
My Discord was going crazy on my laptop, so I just shut off my sound.
Oh, gotcha. You can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. No, you guys did great answering questions, keeping track of Discord. It's super impressive anytime I watch a presenter do that and be able to present and catch all the questions. So it seems like you got most of them. I have just one from the GoToWebinar. Give me one sec here. Are you familiar with cyber resiliency tabletops?
It sounds familiar, but I know that resiliency is a newer coin. Well, not really new, but not familiar with the specific tabletops, if they have free tabletops. But I know that we've aggregated, dozens of different resources of tabletops all over the interwebs to take into ours and then kind of modify and create more scenarios and injects. So each one of our scenarios usually has, 4 or 5 different injects that you can, even though we went through one, that you can kind of add on to it depending on, again, your maturity or whatever you want to work on.
Does the NIST publication on tabletop still apply today? Sounds like your method combines a lot of the recommendations into one session and not separate sessions. Correct. I mean, it's been a while since I've read it.
What does that, I guess, clarify that? You mean the entire NIST cybersecurity framework, or?
No, the one on tabletops, 884.
Oh. Yes.
I read it like 3 years ago.
Yep.
So I'm not sure. Probably, though.
I also saw, I guess, thrown on Discord and just something to comment on is I saw someone mention the executive briefings in red, green, yellow, kind of, high-level stoplight kind of thing. I know that I've had probably over 6 of the 10 bosses I've had were all colorblind. And maybe that was just coincidental.
You're supposed to use
but using just I'm sure that people know this, but using shapes as well as colors go a great deal. You never know. There's a lot of people that have different color variations, capabilities that might not ever say it or want to say it.
But I'm assuming everybody knows what circle is.
I'm also assuming people know what circles and triangles are, but I had a hard time when I was small in the box.
Yesterday.
Yep.
You don't want to assume, I guess.
All right.
Well, thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. We are super honored that Amanda and Jeremy joined us today on the Hackin Cast. And with that, we will say goodbye, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Belle, did you have anything?
All right.
Thank you,
No,
Amanda.
I loved it.
Where can they go to sign up for our class?
I'll say goodbye.
They just
Yes.
They posted it. Perfect. All right.